All right, and we are recording and good to go. So first and foremost, we want to welcome you all to the final part 3 of our series, Navigating Your Cybersecurity Career Journey, where we've invited several panelists to share their insights with you this evening. My name is Alyssa Laskowski, and I work on the SNHU Career Services team, and my role is to partner with academic faculty and staff to host webinars like this one this evening. And so I'd like to take a moment to allow my co-host, Dennis, to say hello and introduce himself. Dennis?
Hi, welcome everybody to this third series of our cyber chat. And I'm the Associate Dean of Cybersecurity here at SNHU, and I work closely with Alyssa when it comes to the career series. And I'm excited to be here. Thank you for the panelists, by the way, that are agreed to be here tonight to talk with our students about all things cyber. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Dennis. And for those who are in the audience this evening, again, please feel free to continue to utilize the chat box and say hello to one another. As I mentioned before, just general housekeeping rules. So all attendees, mics have been muted and your cameras have been disabled and turned off. So again, please use the chat box during the course of this webinar. So let's go ahead and get started. Your experience here at SNHU is very important to us. It's our policy and practice to create an inclusive and accessible learning environment. If there are aspects of this presentation's design or delivery that present barriers to accessibility, please notify the appropriate accessibility centers. So if you're an online student, you can email oac@snhu.edu or call 866-305-9430. If you're a campus student, you can email cac@snhu.edu or call 603-644-3118. Or if you're SNHU staff or faculty, you can simply email hr@snhu.edu. So for those who are also in the audience this evening, we do have 2 action items for you before we begin our panel session this evening. So please pay close attention here. Now, we understand the session moves quickly, so does the flow of all the information that's shared in the chat. So in an effort to allow those in the attendance or in the audience this evening to network and connect with your fellow peers, we've created an optional survey where you can share your LinkedIn profile URL. You can simply scan the QR code on the screen now. Again, there's no obligation or requirement whatsoever to complete this survey. I'm also going to add a link to the survey in the chat box momentarily. And the submissions will only be shared with those students or alumni who are here this evening via email. And panelists, you do not have to complete this survey. This is simply for the students of the audience. You are welcome, however, to share your LinkedIn URL in the chat or with me directly following up via email, which we can then be sure to include in the email communications that will be sent to attendees afterwards. So give me one moment. I'm also going to add this link to the survey in the chat for those who are in the audience this evening. Additionally, we want to try and streamline your questions for the panelists, so please follow these noted steps. Attendees, you can click on the Q&A icon and type in your questions that you want to ask our panel experts. We will read the questions aloud by submitted order, and while we can't guarantee we'll get to every single question, we will do our best before we conclude for this evening. And you can type in your questions for the panelists at any time throughout this session. We will then share them aloud during the scheduled open Q&A portion of tonight's webinar. And so now that we've gone through some of those action items, let's move forward to our agenda. So where are we headed this evening? Today we'll introduce our panelists and we'll ask our pre-prepared questions, and then we're going to open it up to the student Q&A, and then we will conclude and close out our series. Again, as a reminder, this webinar is recorded, so those in the audience, you're not required to take any notes, but you are, of course, welcome to. All attendees will receive a follow-up email with the links to any of the resources that we discussed today, as well as a link to this recording. And once again, final reminder, all attendees' mics and cameras have been muted. So let's introduce our 5 amazing panelists this evening, and I'll also be adding quickly some links to the organizations directly in the chat box momentarily. But let's start with Charles. So Charles serves as the Manager of Vulnerability and Patch Management at Hackensack Meridian Health, overseeing vulnerability scanning, risk assessment, and patch deployment to reduce HMH's attack surface. Charles is a proud Army veteran, having served 8 years with the U.S. Army Field Band and Soldiers Chorus in Washington, D.C., before starting his cybersecurity career journey. We also have Jessica Tolentino. Jessica is a senior talent acquisition specialist at Verizon with 7 years of experience in recruiting and human resources. She has an undergraduate degree from Penn State University and a master's from Strayer. Having focused on cybersecurity recruitment specifically for many years, she brings a unique perspective to the challenges of building your career in cybersecurity. And next we have Jessica Thompson. Jessica currently works as a cyber threat analyst at Bank of America and has held previous roles such as incident response manager and SOC analyst at the Bank of America. Jessica has also served in active duty and reserve military roles such as intelligence analyst and cyber officer in the Air Force and Space for over 11 years. Jessica completed her MBA and MIS degrees at the University of Texas at Dallas in 2021. Jessica is passionate about helping veterans transition to industry and people transition them into STEM careers. Next, we have Brandon. So, Brandon is a cybersecurity analyst and CISSP holder and is responsible primarily for guiding his company, Albany International Corp, through compliance initiatives, most notably CMMC. He graduated from SNHU a little over 3 years ago, where he also worked before jumping into the cyber workforce. And finally, we have Rick. Rick has been training for IT certification since the age of 18 and has served as a senior security engineer for Mainstay Technologies. He is an SNHU alum and notes that IT, particular cybersecurity, is a field that he is very passionate about. Thank you all panelists so much for being here. It is an absolute pleasure to have you. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and type some information about the organizations here in the chat for all of you. And so today we'll begin with several questions for our panelists on what's trending in the cyber field, and then we'll move on to career exploration related questions. So panelists, I will start by randomly calling on one of you to start, and then of course others who wish to answer and chime in can simply just go ahead and chime in. So our first question this evening, excuse me 1 second, here we go. It's gonna load 1 second. This always happens. Here we go. Our first question related to trends is, what current cybersecurity threats or vulnerabilities do you see as the most significant for businesses today? And so, Charles, I'd like you to start with this one, if that's all right with you.
All right, can everybody hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay, so from my perspective, the biggest threat is always going to be people. Getting people to do the right thing, behave the right way, patch their vulnerabilities, take care of their equipment properly, not let people in the doors when they're not supposed to. Like when we're talking about cybersecurity as a functional enterprise, the technology is always there. There's always going to be things like phishing and ransomware and that sort of thing. But our biggest challenge is always people and security culture. Because if you can solve the cultural problem, the rest of it sort of takes care of itself. It's hard to tell people to implement specific remediations or controls or mitigations if their mindset isn't aligned towards increasing and improving security posture in a given organization. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Charles. And I'll let any of the other panelists who'd like to chime in on this question go for it.
Yeah, I completely agree. My job really revolves around studying all the different threats in the environment right now. We're seeing a lot of continued targeting of devices that are end of life or of patches that have simply just not been applied. We're also seeing a lot of these be home network devices that are being utilized as proxy networks to conduct additional targeting. But that really goes back to, what Charles was saying is this all goes back to people and making sure that when we communicate those threats, that's a lot of what working in cybersecurity is about, is are we communicating those threats effectively, and are we ensuring that we have the right accountability and systems in place to hold those people accountable. So completely agree with that.
Thank you, Jessica, for your insight. Any other panelists want to chime in?
Yeah, I would say this has been the age-old tale, but 91% of all incidents usually start with email, with phishing still. So it's the easiest entry and barrier way. So if we could just prevent and stop people from clicking on things, it would make all of our cybersecurity jobs a lot easier, but it also keeps us in business. But I think that's it's one of the most popular still, that ransomware attacks. But I think, again, it's the human factor. I completely agree that human factor is so important, that continuous training is really important.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, and building off of that a little bit, So I mean, what we see a lot of the time is stale, unused, expired passwords, things that have been put into password dumps online or readily available. A lot of the times we think about hacking as these big, like hackers intrusion actually happening, but a lot of time it's just somebody testing a billion passwords on one different account, and one of them works, and suddenly they're in to the environment. And so it goes back again to people and to education and educating people about phishing emails and using password managers and why we make passwords so complicated at times, and pushing people towards passphrases and things like that. So completely agree with everything that's been said.
Thank you, Brandon. And Jessica, Tolentino, I just want to give you a chance to chime in in case of anything else you'd like to add. All righty. We can go ahead and we will move on to our next question. So how are emerging technologies like AI and machine learning influencing the way cybersecurity professionals approach risk management and threat detection? So Jessica Thompson, I'd love to throw this one over to you first.
Sounds great. Yeah, definitely the biggest buzzwords right now. So I think there's a lot of discussion around, utilizing these capabilities to really build off of efficiencies, but also understanding the threats that come along with adopting AI. Um, you know, some of the use cases in the threat detection space are really automating response to potentially malicious traffic. So an example of this would be if we have an IP that is known to be associated with malicious traffic, how do we make sure that we're, automating that response? So there are a lot of different use cases going on around that, and then improving behavioral analytics. So for example, insider threat, right? So how do we observe these different behaviors and learn what's normal on the network, what's normal for a person's behaviors, to help identify when someone decides to do something malicious. I think a lot of companies are really trying to make sure they have the right controls, the right data storage, and the right governance and the underlying technology in place to enable these types of solutions as well. So there's a lot of opportunities in this space right now, and a lot of effort to both understand the threats, but really adopt these efficiencies.
Thank you, Jessica. And feel free, any other panelists, feel free to chime in on this one as well.
Yeah, I feel with especially the dawn of AI and the advent of AI, a lot of the attackers are starting to leverage AI. And so as a defender and a protector, I think it's our duty and our jobs, like we need to leverage those AI powered tools as well to be able to respond as quickly as the attackers are coming at us. So, having automated responses and things like automation. So, when an attack happens, to automatically isolate a user or device, reset passwords, revoke all sessions. If let's say it's Office 365, do all of those things with one click of a mouse versus spending hours of time to do that. That's huge. So, and that also helps a lot with I think the alert fatigue that comes with being in cybersecurity, as we get thousands of these alerts all day long. And so I think it's really important for us to put more human effort towards those events that require a little bit more thought power. And for some of the very easy, low-hanging fruit security vulnerabilities or breaches, leveraging automation for a lot of those has been very helpful.
Awesome insight. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else?
One aspect that's causing some changes has been rethinking some standard approaches. I think a lot of this ties in with deepfakes, actually, and the power of deepfakes through AI. For instance, you have a lot of protections with wire transfers that involve voice calls and voice affirmation of activity, and we're seeing AI that's able to replicate voice very effectively with very little input. So it's causing us to definitely, I know in my company, have conversations about how do we have the right levels of protections around some of these larger dollar transactions or other sensitive things that need to happen that we might otherwise use something like AI, something like a voice call to confirm that AI could now compromise. So it's still pretty early in that, but it's been just amazing to see how in the span of really the past year, these conversations are happening more and more often, are being pushed from higher and higher levels in the company. down to cybersecurity teams to really take that into account.
Thank you, Brandon. It's good insight. And Jessica Tolentino, I saw that we'd lost you there for a second, so I thought you came back, but wanted to let you chime in here as well. But anyone else would like to continue to chime in, go for it. Yeah, we might have lost her again. That's okay. Any other thoughts before we move on to the next one? All right, no worries. Let's do it. Go ahead and click through here. Our next question is, the cybersecurity skills gap has been noted as a significant problem, with studies indicating that the demand for skilled cybersecurity professionals is outpacing the supply. So the question is, what are your thoughts on closing the cyber skills and workforce gap? So Brandon, I'll kick it over to you first for this one.
Sure. I mean, I think at the top of this, I think a lot of us underappreciate what cyber security skills really entail. We can come in with this idea that cyber is purely IT, it's purely technical, but there is such this vast array of different skills and requirements that are needed in the cyber field. If you have a history in education or customer service, or if you do have a technical background, that can certainly help out, but it's not the only thing that's really valuable. And so I think learning how to sell ourselves and learning how to use our experiences that maybe we might not typically think of as being cyber skills is really important. And I think that learning to recognize that as companies is also really important, right? From personal experience, so I used to work in education, and so I would need to break down topics. I would need to provide feedback, and I need to educate my students. And in my compliance role now, I need to break down topics, educate clients, and provide feedback. So, you know, those skills are definitely transferable, and I do think that it's important for us to kind of widen the lens on how we consider ourselves in the field and how we can learn to sell ourselves and hopefully fill that gap, because that's what we're all, I think, all our attendees are looking to do, right, is to be those gap fillers. So.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you for sharing. Any other panelists, feel free to chime in on this one as well.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Go ahead, Charles.
Thanks. So yeah, similar to Brandon, I pivoted into cyber from a different career path. I was actually singing full time before I decided to pivot into cyber. And I have this conversation all the time with people who are looking to get into cybersecurity, and I tell them all the time, like, do not discard everything you've done professionally up to this point. Like, everything is useful. You know, to Brandon's point, like if you've had background in sales or having to talk to people all the time, where you're used to singing on a stage and you're comfortable being in front of large crowds, that's an incredibly useful skill in cybersecurity. Because again, we're leaning back into building consensus with people, especially people who are non-technical, who don't really do cyber professionally. They're just there to benefit from your expertise to protect the business. So, you know, as you all start to look into cyber careers, like never forego the skills you've already developed. Those things are incredibly useful. Okay.
Yeah, I would agree, and I'd echo that. I mean, all of these, you know, personable skills, the communication, the written skills, those are so important in every field. So those are, you know, are great. And so for me personally, being a trainer for the past 25 years, education is such a passion of mine. Like, I really feel we need to start teaching IT and having certification classes like in the elementary school level, you know, like really bringing the kids up with some of these programs and instilling this stuff in, you know, much earlier on in their career. So I have two young boys that are 9 and 11, and I always joke they'd have their MCSE and all their certifications by the time they're 8. That hasn't happened yet, but I think, you know, the earlier that we can get people involved and excited and really knowledgeable about IT, the better off they're going to be.
Yeah, and if you start looking out for companies who hire, they like I came into Bank of America on a rotational program. So there's a lot of companies out there who are looking at ways to fill this gap. So that's something that you can look for. What companies value really bringing in entry level people, but also training and developing them. And you can find out a lot more about that by doing informational interviews with these companies or people that work at these companies. So definitely would love to see more programs like this out there. I think maybe we are all career pivoters. I was originally worked in food and beverage and then was an intelligence analyst. I didn't realize at first that so many of these skills were so transferable. So, you know, just starting to have those conversations and understand which of your skills are transferable for which careers within cybersecurity, because it is such a broad field, can really help you, you know, you build that gap, bridge that gap yourself as well.
Wonderful. Thank you all for sharing. Really appreciate that. Some really great advice. We're going to go ahead and move on to more of our career exploration focused questions here. So the first question is, what types of certifications or qualifications are essential for cybersecurity applicants or professionals to have? So Rick, I'll turn this one over to you to get started.
Oh, thanks. One of my personal favorite topics. So
I thought
prior
so.
to come, yeah. So I've been at Mainstay for 15 years, an amazing organization. Prior to coming to Mainstay, I've been a Microsoft trainer for about 15 years. So my true passion and love is teaching and training and growing humans and individuals. So I think the most important thing for any career in IT is to understand the fundamentals, right? So if you have a good grasp on the basics, things like the A plus, Network plus, Security plus certifications, they're vendor agnostic. So you really get your exposure into a lot of different genres with not it being a specific technology. So I think those are always good kind of base fundamental certifications to have. And then as you know, if cybersecurity absolutely is the field that you want to focus on, there's tons of certifications out there. So, you know, going up a little bit further into some more advanced certifications, looking at things like, you know, certified ethical hacker, CISSP, the CISA, and I know Microsoft has some specific ones like the SC900, SC100. I'll paste those in the chat just so you have direct links to those. I was prepared for some of those. It is super important. So, you know, I'll tell you from my company's perspective, from Mainstay's perspective, we'd rather hire a good human being than we would someone that's an absolute technical rock star, because we can teach the technical skills, we can't teach the human skills. And so it's really important that whatever field you go in, you always have to be continuously learning. But it's always important. And these, I think, set you apart in the interview process. When you have those credentials on your resume and you have those certifications, it definitely, you know, puts you in the different pile when they're interviewing candidates.
Thank you, Rick. That's awesome. I knew you were the right one to answer this question first, so appreciate you sharing your thoughts there. And Jessica Tolentino, I know you were having some tech issues. I hope you can hear and see now, but we'd love to kick this question over to you if you're able to chime in. If not, I will keep trying for you, girlfriend. We'll figure this out. No worries. Tech is not on my side either, so feel free to chime in, Jessica, if you can in the chat if you need to. We'll get this straightened out for you. But anyone else, feel free to chime back in on this question about certifications or qualifications.
Yes, I was just about to say, I posted a link to Paul Jeremy's website, and he has done everybody a favor of making a security certification roadmap. And I don't think that list is exhaustive. But if you're looking at certifications, for sure, like Rick said, A plus, Network plus, Security plus. Like most people you're going to interview for are not looking at you to be an expert on any of these things, but it's helpful to have that knowledge in the back of your mind and be prepared to kind of think through it. Because I think apart from being a nice person, if we're going to lean into technical ability, we're really also looking for people who can think well. Like you're willing to do the work of just kind of thinking through the problems. Nobody expects you to be a guru in any of these technical focuses. But if you can think your way through a problem, that's going to go a long way in cyber. But Jeremy's website, lots of solid road mapping there with each of the major lanes in cybersecurity, and He's stacked those certifications for you from entry level on up. I found that to be a particularly valuable resource, especially for the interns we had last year, and sort of just broadening their horizons into what what they could do in the cyber world. So hope that's helpful to all of you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Charles.
And hi, Alyssa, I did make it back in finally.
Okay.
I hope you can all hear me. I'm so sorry. I think that does speak to the fact that I'm the non-technical panelist here. But I'm glad to be back in. If I missed an intro, I'm Jessica Tolentino, part of our cybersecurity recruitment team at Verizon. And for us, I kind of agree with what they just said regarding certifications. They're not a hard requirement at our company either, but a lot of for our hiring managers, a lot of what it shows is that you're a self-starter, that you're passionate about the industry, and that you're out there on the side trying to build up your skills and further your career. And that's something that our managers are really, really looking for. The industry is constantly changing, and the threat actors that we're up against, they're not idly sitting back. They are constantly changing and constantly working to outsmart us. So doing those things on the side, while they may not be required for the role, they are things that really can help push you forward. It shows that you are driven that way. The main one we usually suggest for entry level is that Security Plus. That's the one that we feel gives the best baseline for your cyber career, as it covers most things. Another thing we always suggest is if you're not sure what area of cyber to go into, CyberSeek has a pretty good breakdown of the type of career paths you can take within cyber. So I'm happy to share that link for everyone, but that's another one we always suggest as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessica. We're glad you're back. I know technology is never our friend, my friend either. So thank you for sharing that insight and mentioning CyberSeek as well. It's actually a plug, a resource we have currently on our virtual career center, Career 360. So many of those in the audience are quite familiar with Career 360. If you've attended some of these webinars in the past, take a look at that. We highlight CyberSeek on our dedicated cybersecurity page. So take a look at that, and I'll be adding those links to Career 360 in the chat momentarily. But let's go ahead and we'll continue on to our next question. Let me just make sure the page reloads here. Just have to click through these. Give me 1 second. All right. So our next question. Actually, Jessica Tolentino, this is the question for you to kick us off with, but wanted to ask this. So for those who are applying to entry-level roles or opportunities, what types of projects or maybe experiences would you recommend that they highlight to stand out as an applicant? So Jessica, why don't we take this away with this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if this was covered a little bit, but I know that there was a statistic a couple years ago that came out in, I believe it was the New York Times, that said that there were 2 million unfilled cyber jobs. And while that was technically true at that time, it was a little bit misleading in the fact that a lot of those open jobs were principal level positions, they were senior level positions. And what that did was really make a large influx of people coming into the cyber industry, which is fantastic, but it's something that we're working to fix right now for entry-level candidates. We're working with managers on what does entry-level actually look like. I see some comments in the chat about that. You do see some junior and entry-level that are posted with higher level years of experience. So that's something that we always are working on. The biggest thing that I would suggest is even if you're coming just out of school or you are coming out of a different career, I always say to look at the job description and break down the bullet points when it comes to the requirements or even just the job responsibilities and say, this is what I've done and how. Even if it wasn't specifically in a cyber position, even if it's just communication, you've done this for communication, you've done this for project management, here are the stakeholders you have worked with in other projects. And it's really breaking a job description down into situations that you've gone through that have helped you check that bullet off. And then you see where the gaps are. And those gaps are what I would focus on when it comes to projects, trainings, and honestly, volunteer work is a lot of one that I will mention. There are small businesses, nonprofits, churches out there that everyone's using IT now. Everyone has the technology, and a lot of them aren't really using it that well. So volunteering in smaller organizations like that can really help you get that hands-on experience if that's something that you're struggling with. But always look at the job description and see, here's what I've done and how, even if it's not specifically in a cyber job. You can also too, if it's something you haven't done, do the research or take a training or something like that to say, I haven't done this hands-on, but here's what I've done to learn about it. And then here is how I would do it in the position. Because if you get to an interview, that's the best way to highlight your passion, but also your potential. Because if you get on there and you say, I don't really know how to do that, I've never done that, that kind of closes the door on the further conversation there.
That's great advice. Thank you, Jessica, for sharing that. And I'll let the other panelists add their thoughts on this question as well.
Yeah, I feel personally, the more you can tinker, and work at home, set up lab environments, set up virtualized environments, try to get real world experience, some of these things, do things like capture the flag or hack the box. There's a lot of these competitions that are online. I just posted in the chat, Mainstay, we always offer internships. And so this is obviously one of the best ways to get exposure to it is when you're kind of in a non-stressful environment and you have the ability to kind of learn from people that have been there and done that for multiple years. It's really exciting. So few thoughts.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, I did a similar thing when I started studying cybersecurity. I bought a bunch of Raspberry Pis and a switch and network them all together and practice my Linux skills and my networking skills. I then graduated to AWS free tier when I started learning about AWS. And I actually recommend that to everybody because you don't need any money to start up. You can spin up your EC2 instances. When you're done with them, turn them off so you don't incur any charges and then log out. And it's a great place to learn your networking, learn your Linux or Windows, and get a feel for AWS. I think the three majors have free tiers: AWS, Azure, and GCP. So that's a path forward if you just want to get your feet wet on some of the technical stuff.
Yeah, I would also add, if you're competing in capture the flags, if you're, tinkering at home, building these things, making sure that you're communicating all of what you're doing. So having some sort of public website or a portfolio, or even sharing on LinkedIn and starting to have conversations with different employers. Sometimes that can help you get that interview, right? If you're doing all of these things, make sure that you're advertising that and marketing yourself as well, because that can be an important part of the process.
Yeah, and then also, so I remember when I was going through my master's degree at SNHU, I would reference NIST documentation all the time, and anybody that works in DoD adjacent, or any kind of compliance setting, NIST is just like the holy grail in terms of publicly available and accessible compliance documents. And so when I applied for my first cyber job, I actually submitted some of the documentation that I created through my classes, showing how I referenced NIST documents and how I would actually implement them in these hypothetical scenarios, but still it just gave some insight into my understanding and what I learned. So definitely leverage what you're doing in school and find ways to preserve that and put it forward when you are looking for those applications, and take it seriously, because it can make a big difference for you through that application process. It did for me, no doubt.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you all for sharing This is some really, really great advice, and a lot of what we echo here in SNHU Career Services, and a lot of these resources are on our Career 360 page as well. So I'm glad that we're all kind of speaking the same language. So that's great. And so we do have one final question in kind of our career exploration category. Kind of really stems from what you all have kind of shared already, but particularly more on the lines of kind of that career transition, career switchers. So what specific advice would you give to someone who wants to transition or switch careers into cybersecurity from another field? And so I think, Charles, I'll go ahead and have you start this one for us.
Be patient. Be very patient. When I was trying to get into the field, it took me 2 years, and the master's degree really helped kind of bump me along. But my first employer said, it's really hard to get into cyber. And once you're in, you're in. He's like, it's easy to move around, but getting in's always tough. And most of the people I've talked to who switch careers have similar stories. Be patient, continue to work on your skills, learn as much as you can. Sell yourself, as was mentioned earlier, like never hurts to self-promote, be shameless about it, and it'll work out for you at some point. You'll find the position that works for you, because what you don't want is just any job. And cyber is as much about like fit with your skills and your temperament and your outlook as much as anything else. And you don't want to find yourself in a position that just doesn't work for you or the employer. Right. So as you're looking around, it's not important to just get a job. It's just find a job that's going to work well for you and the people you'll be working for. So, keep that in mind. And if you're patient, you'll be able to balance all of those competing interests against your desire to work.
Thank you, Charles. And once again, I'll open it up to all the panelists here who would like to add their thoughts.
Yeah, I would echo that. I would say one of my personal favorite speeches is keep the confidence high, right? It can be very demoralizing when you're applying for these things and sometimes you get rejected. But if this is something you're passionate about and something you really want to do, never give up, never stop trying, always keep working your hardest. And I think this goes back to the previous conversations, like identify those transferable skills that you have, identify some of those strengths that you have, learn the fundamentals, learn things like A+, Network+, earn some of these industry standard recognition certifications. And I think I saw one of the questions in the chat about, the diploma versus certification. I think personally, they're both important. I think in today's world, skills and certifications sometimes stand out more than a diploma, but I think diplomas also go in a different stack that it raises up to the top. So I think they're both really important. But just be passionate and find a mentor, And so I put my LinkedIn profile out there already. So I'm always happy to teach and coach and help be a mentor and always continue working and learning more. Like no one ever knows everything there is to know in the IT space, especially when it comes to cybersecurity. So always keep learning, always keep pushing yourself and bettering yourself.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah. I just add that to that too. Do your research, right? Throw your resume into ChatGPT with, a job role that you think you might be interested in and ask it, what are my transferable skills? Start having conversations. Don't be afraid to message people on LinkedIn and say, hey, I see you're in this type of role. Message someone who's in an entry-level role and say, what is your day-to-day like? I'd love to understand more. The more that you can have these types of conversations, the more you're going to understand how to transfer the skills that you already have. You also never know who's going to offer to recommend you for a role. I've had lots of informational interviews, and at the end of the call, I'm just thanking them for their time. And they're like, we actually have this open role. I'd love to recommend you for it. Just because they can tell that you can communicate, they start to understand your background and your interests. I would also say look around for groups like Women in Cybersecurity, SANS conferences, B-Sides, local ISA or ISC2 or ISACA chapters, and get involved, attend these events. This is going to also help you build that network. That's going to help you communicate your skills. Again, you're going to be telling your story over and over again, but then you're also going to have a better understanding of who's hiring for entry-level roles and a better network at all of these different companies to help you kind of get your foot in the door and get that initial role. This information can also be invaluable when you try to understand best fit. That's huge because cyber is so broad. Informational interviewing is invaluable to help you make that best decision for you.
Yeah, I love some of the things that you mentioned there. And for us, from the recruitment perspective, I'm in there looking at applications almost all day, every single day. And I will say some of my biggest tips is set alerts on the company's websites for the companies you are interested in. Because as soon as a position posts, especially an entry level one, I know from my experience, we get a couple thousand applicants within the first 2-ish days. And unfortunately, we just don't have all the time to get through every single applicant. And that's unfortunate, and we don't want it to be that way. So that's why I always suggest setting those alerts, applying as early as you can. And that way, that really, really helps. Networking is always big. I love that the other Jessica mentioned some of the conferences. I know, for example, we have all of our cyber recruiters. There's 5 of us, I believe, going, along with about 10 of our business attendees, business people, to the Women in Cybersecurity Conference in Dallas next week, as we're one of the sponsors for that. So we go to those conferences with positions that we can hire for almost on the spot. So those conferences and those networking events are really, really important. And you don't only meet recruiters there. Like I said, we have senior directors going, we have people in charge of our risk management and our pen testing teams, and they are there on site interviewing people all day as you walk up to the booth. So those are really, really important as well. And then again, like I said, patience. Unfortunately, it can be a numbers game, but don't let that get you down. And try to remember the patience when talking with managers and recruiters and things like that. We're just as frustrated as you with the lack of entry level, and we want it too. So please try to remember that as you go, because any impression that you make along the way can follow you. The managers talk to each other. So just keep that in mind as you're kind of going through. We know it's discouraging, but try not to let that get to you.
Yeah, and I'll just echo. It's it's not always about the technical skills. It's about that passion and fire. So like technical skills, we can teach you all day long. I can't teach someone to have excitement and passion and fire to want to be in this field, to want to grow, to want to learn more. Those are the uncoachable and unteachable things that people need to bring to the table. And so for me, again, we'd much rather hire someone that has that passion, has that fire, has those core values versus someone that's a technical architect, genius.
Yeah, I think one thing to keep in mind too here is that your first job may not be your last job. In fact, it probably won't be your last job. And so sometimes starting out in your first role, it may not be what you thought it was. It may not work out, and that's okay. Don't get discouraged if that's the case. There's so many opportunities in so many different places that you can go, that I would really, really implore you, if you're on this call, then clearly you have some level of intent here. And so, keep looking, keep searching, because there really are just endless opportunities. I know for me, it took some soul searching after an opportunity didn't work out too well, but again, there's a place for everyone. You just have to find it.
Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to share all of these wonderful nuggets of advice and insights. And I definitely feel motivated and inspired hearing from all of you. So thank you all so much for that. We're going to go ahead and move it. We've got we're making really great time here, so we're gonna now turn it over to those in our audience for our open Q&A. So we've now arrived at the open Q&A portion of this session. So this is the time that students in the audience can now ask questions for our panelists to answer. So as a reminder, attendees, you can now click on the Q&A icon. We want to make sure that you type in your questions that you want to ask our panel experts. Then myself and my colleague Dennis, we will read the questions aloud by submitting submitted order. Again, we cannot guarantee we'll get to every single question. We will try and do our best before we conclude this evening. So go ahead at this moment. Go ahead and continue to submit your questions. Dennis, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and read the first one that I see, and then we'll just kind of keep scrolling down the line if that's okay with you. So let me see here. One of the first questions I see here is, what opportunity do you recommend for graduate students that are new to cybersecurity within your specific organizations? And this will be more popcorn style, panelists, so feel free just to chime in.
I think personally, shadowing and reverse shadowing, right? So when you have those junior or more kind of green employees that are a little nervous, maybe haven't walked the ropes that others that have been there for years have, like pairing up a junior team member with a senior team member and having that mentor, having that support system, having someone that can help guide you through more advanced situations is always extremely helpful.
I would say for roles specifically, I know Bank of America attends a lot of the larger conferences as well, like the other Jessica was mentioning. So look out for those types of opportunities. I was hired through the Grace Hopper conference, which has already passed for last year, but I believe they do early registration for that, and it's typically in October every year. You can look for entry-level roles on the website if you ever see something that you're interested in, that you're curious about. Happy to hop on a call and chat about that. But there are typically entry-level roles available and internships. So make an alert, like I think someone mentioned earlier, for the career website, and look out for those. LinkedIn is always a good way to watch out for open roles as well.
Great, thank you. Dennis, why don't we go ahead and read the next one aloud, please?
Yeah, this is actually something that I'm interested in as well. I heard several of the panelists talk about this. How do you go about getting informational interviews?
Personally, I would say through networking, and I want to say careful networking, because I can't even name or number the amount of messages I get on a regular basis that are asking me to refer them to a position or send them to the hiring manager just because my title says recruiter. So careful networking when it comes to reaching out to people. Make sure you're looking at their full LinkedIn page, and saying, okay, this is kind of the area that they're in. I will also say most company emails are pretty easy to guess. So if you have one email from someone who from a company, and you find someone who has a job that you're looking for, their company email might be pretty easy to guess, which is always something that gets to us a lot faster than LinkedIn. If any of my managers ask, I did not recommend that personally, but it is always an option. But I also say as well, with the careful networking, make sure you're not just reaching out and asking them for something. There's a lot going on in cyber right now, so they know they have a lot happening, and things like that. So make sure you're reaching out and saying, hey, I'm really interested in this. I have looked at the types of positions you have. Do that little bit of background work. So you're not just saying, hey, I need to know about your team, or please recommend me for this position, and things like that. So make sure you do some of that background work as well.
Awesome. Thank you, panelists. As we're scrolling through the questions, I see a lot of kind of reoccurring questions that are kind of all around more or less the same theme. So I'm going to kind of combine some of them. But one of the questions we keep getting up is more related to internships and those who are interested in applying or seeking internships. What are some tips or tricks or advice you would give to students in the audience who do want to pursue an internship? Maybe that includes what are some internship job titles you see quite often, and then when they are applying for those internship positions, what are some recommended tips or advice you would give to help them really, again, stand out as an applicant? Again, kind of the C that we know that happens with lots of interns looking for the same type of role.
Yeah, I would say interviewing skills, right? So the elevator pitch, as a lot of you have probably heard about, right? Being able to take that 2 minutes and very eloquently, very precisely describe yourself. Who are you? Why are you here? Why do we want to hire you? Like that first 5 minutes of an interview, honestly, for me, as I've interviewed 90% of our company, is are you on time? Are you punctual? Are you prepared? Right? Are you dressed for the job? Um, those are some of the easy ones, right? And then it comes to, again, a lot of it I think comes down to the personality, that fire, that passion, that excitement about the role. Those are things that can't be faked very easily. So if you're truly passionate about getting the job there, you should show up that way for every interview.
And I would add to that as well. I mean, doing your homework about the company you're going to work for, even if it's not necessarily about the role itself, but most companies are going to have things about their values. They're going to have information about their mission. They're going to have recent projects that they've undertaken. In doing that background work to understand what is this company actually about, showcasing that, hey, like I can do some of this research online. I know where to look. I know how to find this. Those kinds of skills are certainly valuable, and especially in the cyber field and all across the board.
Yeah, to piggyback off of Brandon just said, um, you as a cybersecurity professional would be working to protect the business. So if you don't know anything about the business you're applying to, it's a bit of a no-go for me as a hiring manager. I don't need you to know how to break down the business. Just know what we do, know what the pain points are, know what the broader goals are.
I'll just add a quick comment here too. I think that goes for anything, even when you're reaching out for informational interviews. If I get messages with a question that I could easily Google, I'm probably not going to respond, right? It's not that I'm trying to be rude or I don't want to help. Like I always want to help, but the best thing you can do, especially when you're working in cybersecurity, is do that little bit of upfront work to show that you're invested. And mainly, especially working in cybersecurity, because you have to be resourceful. You have to be able to do a lot with a little bit and figure out complex problems. So demonstrate that in all of your communications and interviews, and you'll get a lot further.
That's great insight. Thank you. Dennis, I'll kick it back to you if you want to ask some of the other questions that have popped up. If not, I can go ahead.
Yeah,
there you go.
some of these because some of them are repeats. Most of it is about finding entry-level positions, which I know they can be difficult.
Yeah, I was looking, actually, there's a common theme that's come up here, so I'll maybe ask this question more related to networking, right? So we know that there's value in making those vital connections with those professionals in the field. Where or how would you go about finding cybersecurity professionals to network with? What has been kind of your networking journey? Where have you gotten started? And are there any sort of, again, networking sites, resources, spaces that you would recommend students check out to really kind of, again, make those vital connections?
For me, before I worked at Verizon, I worked for a staffing agency, which worked with larger companies like Verizon. And a lot of what I did in finding candidates for positions was I believe the app is called Meet or Meetup. And I searched for meetups in my area for the types of roles that I was working on, like DevOps or cyber. And there were actually a lot. And I was able to go to meetings in the area. I'm in New Jersey, if that helps anyone, and meet people face to face and kind of chat with them about their positions. There's actually a lot on those sites. I also think, yes, the local chapters of conferences are really, really important. And you can really network at any time. You can chat with your neighbors. People will tell you what their job is 99% of the time. I'm sure that you know what your neighbors do, what your kids' friends' parents do. So any time can be a networking opportunity. So just kind of put it out there and see. You never know who you're going to run into out there.
Thank you, Jessica. Appreciate that. Trying to keep an eye on the clock here. We got about 5 minutes or so. So another kind of reoccurring theme, some of the Q&A that's coming through is related more to, again, more of the opportunities to gain experience, especially if you cannot complete a traditional internship program. So we do have a lot of students who are, currently working full-time or caregiving full-time. And so some of those more rigid traditional internship programs where they might have to work 40 hours a week, or it might be more full-time, just might not fit within their realistic schedule. So just any other advice or opportunities would you suggest for those individuals, again, who maybe cannot fit a traditional internship program within their schedule? How would you recommend them going about gaining that vital hands-on experience and where to find it?
I think it was mentioned earlier in the call to offer yourself to a lot of smaller businesses, nonprofits, churches, that sort of thing. Say, hey, I have some skills, or I'd like to get some more experience, and I'm willing to do this for you for free. And, someone's going to say yes to you eventually. Like someone said, IT is everywhere. We're all locked in. We don't really have a choice in the matter. We have to learn how to use it properly and use it securely. So seek out those opportunities. And they're always in the places you least expect. So
I also think things like Hack the Box or Try Hack Me, micro-credentials can be really valuable, especially if you're posting those publicly to places like LinkedIn or to an online portfolio. It's certainly not the same, but it does give you an independent validation for some of the skills that you have.
Yeah, I would also go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jessica.
All right, just really quick. I just add also look out for opportunities that maybe align to what you're currently doing. There are a lot of non-technical roles that can help you get your foot in the door. Like my company is huge. We have, I think, thousands of people that work in information security. So there are a lot of roles that you're going to have transferable skills, and you can get your foot in the door that way. So definitely keep looking. It might be a little bit even harder, right? But those roles are out there, and it's a great way to get your foot.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's also I know back in the day Microsoft used to have a lot of like free hands-on virtual labs that you could just go into their environment and play with a lot of these things, which is super helpful. But I know training platforms like Udemy and Pluralsight, just to name a couple, they also have lots of like online virtual labs where they have pre-configured virtual servers and environments already set up. And so to be able to go into those and actually test and play with them saves you the time of having to spend hours of setting up your own virtual environments. And it gives you a lot of good real world experience.
And I'll just do a quick plug-in for career services too. So we extensively talked about transferable skills and options for gaining experience. If maybe if a traditional internship program is not a fit for you, we really covered this topic in full detail in part 2 of this career webinar series. So if you did not get a chance to attend part 2, I highly encourage you to take a look at that. That video is posted on our Career 360 website. We really do a deep dive into this topic, and it's full of great insights, some things that you can proactively do through volunteering, short-term projects like Forge, which offers free job simulations. Believe it or not, there are tons of people looking for volunteers who have cyber skills like all of you have. It's a great way to kind of add that additional experience to your resume and won't take up a full-time, or interrupt your full-time commitments elsewhere. So definitely encourage you to take a look at that part 2 of that series. We really dive into that topic more specifically. I know we have time for a few more questions. So one question that has popped up a couple times is there looks like there's someone who's actually completing an internship with Verizon. Just wanted to ask, what are some opportunities for those who might be in internships right now or who do get an internship? How can they differentiate themselves for potentially moving from an intern or getting that full-time offer within that organization?
I hate to kind of beat a dead horse here, but in your internship, talk to people who are not just your direct intern manager. If the person who asked that question is at Verizon, send me a Slack message and I'm happy to chat with you personally. But yes, talk to people who are not just your direct intern manager. As interns, at least at Verizon, you have such a unique opportunity to talk to leaders. We do events for our internships where the CEO attends, our other C-suite people attend these internships events, and you have such a unique experience to talk to some leadership that people in the full-time positions, they may never even see those people. So utilize that. Say, I'm an intern and I want to talk to you about your career. Some of the higher level, especially leaders, they love that. So just put yourself out there. I know it can be very scary, but the first sentence is the hardest sentence. After that, you're usually good. That's my biggest advice there.
Just to illustrate that, I came into Bank of America in a rotational program, and I used that all the time. And I made a goal for myself of so many people to connect with every couple of weeks. And I'm out of the program now, and I got back from military leave about 6 months ago. I've had 3 different job offers since I got back of people who knew me from before. So it's really powerful. You're building a reputation for yourself, and there's open roles. They need people. They just need to know that you exist and that you're someone who's competent and, can do the job.
Thank you, everyone. Just keeping an eye on the clock. We are at time, but I want to squeeze in this one last question because I think it'll kind of help round out some things. But just based on some of the advice you've shared, which industry really do you see now or maybe in the future who's really going to be actively looking for cybersecurity professionals? I guess what industry do you really see cybersecurity being heavily impacted, or where do you see some growth opportunities?
The government, CMMC for sure. MSPs are another one. Absolutely. I think finance, pretty much all verticals, but CMMC with all those initiatives are definitely a hot one. I think HIPAA has always been there, and I think the financial and the legal verticals are going to be probably the next.
Yeah, completely agree on the CMMC front. I mean, that we've talked with a lot of organizations who still don't know what it is. There's a lot of people who think that it's going to be canceled. It doesn't seem that that's happening. So there's going to be a big need for both compliance as well as technical security professionals to help fill that gap once the DoD starts rolling out these security requirements and assessment requirements.
Almost any company you see in the news for some sort of, even if it's not directly cyber related, they're going to be looking for cyber professionals. Basically, as soon as that hits the news, I bet those roles are already posted. Shameless plug, we're going to be hiring a couple hundred people over the next couple of years. So feel free to connect with me and reach out. I don't know what levels they will be all yet. We're working on it, but we're going to see quite an influx over the next couple of years.
Thank you all. Well, I really, truly appreciate, hate cutting off time. I wish this conversation could go on for forever, but we are officially a little bit at time, if not overtime. So that does conclude our panel event and our webinar series this evening. So thank you all so much for joining us. And again, a huge thank you to our panelists for sharing their amazing advice and insights about cyber careers. Again, reminders for those in the audience, you will receive an email to your SNHU email with a link to this recording as well as additional information that's been shared. You can also go to Career 360 to find literally everything you need that we've talked about this evening. So for now, everyone, you can now simply click the leave the meeting icon. And panelists, we will be following up with each of you via email tomorrow just to say thank you again for your time this evening. Once again, thank you all for being here. I hope you all have a great and wonderful evening. Hope you all take care. Bye now.
Thank you.